In a few years, the United Nations will move to destroy Israel. It's clearly prophesied in the Bible. Israeli Prime Minister Netanyahu spoke before the UN this past week. In light of the prophecies, it's interesting what he had to say. We'll discuss his remarks on today's edition of Politics and Religion.
Look, there are two things I don't discuss: politics and religion.
In my house, we don't talk about politics and we don't talk about religion.
I'll talk to you about anything except politics and religion.
I never talk about politics and religion.
Politics determines how we'll live here on earth. Religion determines how we'll live forever. I'm Irvin Baxter. I think it's time we talk about it. So the question is, are we 1 year, 2 years, 3 years away from the signing of the peace agreement that will signal the beginning of the final 7 years to the Battle of Armageddon and the second coming of Jesus to the earth? We don't know the answer to that right now. However, a lot of things that happened at the United Nations this past week gives us a little bit of insight as to what's really going on and what the inner workings are right now of events in Israel, both among the Palestinians and also among the Israelis. What we want to do, yesterday we took time to go through the speech of Mahmoud Abbas that he made at the United Nations. And in this speech, he let everyone know that he was officially applying once again for Palestinian membership as a full member in the United Nations. Now, up till now, that's been blocked by the United States of America. Nevertheless, it appears that pressure keeps building, shoving in that direction. The latest event is during this last session just concluded of the General Assembly. They raised the Palestinian flag alongside all the other flags, even though Palestine is not a member. The General Assembly officially voted them the status of non-member state. So why did the Palestinians receive the honor of having their flag flown alongside all the others? Now, in order to do this, Mahmoud Abbas had asked them to fly the Palestinian flag and also the flag of the Vatican. Well, this was right during the time that the Pope was visiting and riding an incredible wave of popularity, plus speaking before the United Nations. And even though the Vatican did not request it, yet the final result was that both the Vatican flag and the Palestinian flag were flown alongside all the other flags of the member nations of the United Nations. All of this is incremental steps moving toward the time that the Palestinians can have full membership. But even beyond that, what's going to happen concerning Palestine? Does it really become a state with control over its own property or not? That's the real battle that's going on here. Now, both sides in their speeches endorse a two-state solution to the Palestinian-Israeli problem. The real problem is, however, what does that two-state solution look like? Mahmoud Abbas and the Palestinians say that Israel should withdraw to all the territory that was captured in the 1967 war. For those of you that are watching on the web, we have a map here on the screen right now, and you can see the territory marked the West Bank. It's the yellow territory. Now, that's the territory that the Palestinians are claiming for their state. In addition to that, you see the area marked Gaza down below. That also is proposed to be a part of the Palestinian state, even though Mahmoud Abbas doesn't presently control that area. That's ruled right now by Hamas. So we see this situation. However, if Israel would indeed withdraw completely from the West Bank, and by the way, this is what the borders looked like prior to 1967, before Israel was attacked by Egypt and by Jordan and by Syria. If they would withdraw to this point, it would leave them 9 miles wide at the waist. They already are about 1/3 of the size of the state of Indiana. It would bring their territory even down further. And Israel states that these borders would be indefensible. When the 1967 war took place, within a few months after the 67 war, the UN Security Council passed a resolution that Israel should negotiate with the Palestinians and should trade land for peace. Now, they specifically did not say all the land because they said final borders should be negotiated. If the UN meant that Israel had to withdraw from the UN standpoint all the way to pre-1967 borders, then there would be nothing to negotiate. They would simply withdraw to 67 borders and that would be it. However, the UN resolution said that they should negotiate secure borders so that both of the entities could live in security, and that they should negotiate those borders between the two parties. Well, they've tried repeatedly since 1967 to actually negotiate the borders, but they've not been able to. Now, before I go into the speech of Prime Minister Netanyahu, I'd like to pull up our other map, and the other map actually shows what happened at the Oslo Accords in 1993. Now, this is when Yitzhak Rabin was the prime minister of Israel. He agreed to the Oslo Accords, which established this. You're looking at the West Bank now. We're not looking at Israel proper now, but we're looking at the territory that Israel took in the 1967 war. Now, remember who they took that territory from. They took the territory from Jordan, because in the 48 war, the War of Independence, when Israel declared independence and the Arab countries closed in to try to destroy the nation before it could ever really be born, when they had that war, the borders had ended up in Israel proper. But when the different powers attacked Israel in 1967, well, first of all, in the 48 war, Jordan came across the Jordan River and they captured all this territory. Before then, this territory had been part of the British Mandate, but the British were tired of messing with all the conflict, so they, on May the 14th of 1948, they pulled their troops out and said, we're washing our hands of it, and we don't care what happens, really. They sort of turned it over to the United Nations. Well, then Jordan moved right in and occupied all the territory. So from 1948 until 1967, Jordan controlled all of this land here. It was not a Palestinian state. As a matter of fact, Israel likes to say, if you're so concerned about having a Palestinian state, why didn't you form one from 1948 to 1967? The people of Israel are convinced that what the Palestinians really want is the total destruction of the nation of Israel, and actually that's been stated repeatedly by many officials of the Palestinians. However, Mahmoud Abbas, he is taking another tack. He is saying, well, we simply want all this land back. But remember, when the Oslo Accords were negotiated in 1993, you may remember the big handshake between Arafat and Yitzhak Rabin, with Bill Clinton bringing them together. It was quite a deal on the White House lawn that they did on September, I believe it was September the 13th of 1993. This is what they established. They established 3 areas in the West Bank. The light area is Area C. The green area is Area B, and the striped area is Area A. Now, included, I believe, in the striped area are the 8 largest Palestinian cities. And so the first thing they did was turn control of these cities over to the Palestinians so that they could govern themselves. Israel didn't want to govern them, and so they wanted them to have self-government. I believe that was enacted around 1995. I know Yasser Arafat, who was exiled from the country, was brought back in 1994. So in 1995, the Palestinians begin to rule over their major cities, which is where the bulk of their population is. Well, then, between now and then, Israel also has turned Area B over to them. So they basically have self-rule over Area A and B. There are no Israeli soldiers. Now, Israel still reserves the right to go in if there's trouble and settle the problems. Or if there are people who commit crimes and then flee into these territories to try to escape judgment from the Israeli government, they will go in and they will move in by overwhelming force, and they will arrest whoever may be involved, just like they did this week when the two people were killed with their 4 children in the back seat. They were killed by snipers near Ramallah, which of course is the headquarters of the Palestinian state right now. So when that happens, Israel will go in, but most of the time, for example, when we go to some of these cities like Jericho, like Bethlehem, there's no Israeli presence there. There are Palestinian police working in harmony with the Israelis in order to make everything work so everyone can live at peace. And normally it works okay. Nevertheless, so I just wanted you to see the picture of what's going on right now. Now, in the territory of the striped area, Part A and Part B, you've got about 97% of the Palestinian population. There are 150 Palestinians living in Part C, and there are like 300 to 350,000 Israelis living in Part C. Well, Arafat says the Israelis all have to move out of here. However, that's not practical. They have their homes, they have their businesses, and many of the politicians in Israel say, look, why don't we just give them Part A and B? Let's just annex Part C and be done with it. But of course, that's not acceptable to the Palestinians. They want it all. Well, President Obama, now he claims that Israel should withdraw from these territories except for certain land swaps. And that means the territories close to Jerusalem where there are large Israeli population centers, that Israel would keep those and then find equal territory somewhere else they can give to the Palestinians, so the Palestinians could say, we got 100% of our land back. Now, that's where things stand right now. There is going to be an agreement. There is going to be a Palestinian state, however the borders end up being drawn. And in order to solve the Jewish problem, many of the Jews that live out here in Area C will decide to remain there living as a Jewish minority under the Palestinian state. We know that because Jesus said that halfway through the final 7-year period, the peace agreement is going to be signed at the beginning of the 7-year period, halfway through the 7-year period, that the Jews who live in Judea, and by the way, this area is Judea, Samaria, Judea in the south part of it, Samaria in the northern part of it, that these Jews living here are going to have to run for their life or be slaughtered. That's Matthew chapter 24, verse 15 through 21. Jesus said, when you see the abomination of desolation, then let those which be in Judea run for their lives, because then will be great tribulation, such as never been before, nor ever again shall be. So this is the reality that we're living with right now. And when we get back, we're going to go to the speech of Netanyahu.
The seeds of the Battle of Armageddon were sown on November 29th, 2012. The seeds sown on that historic day are in the process of producing a dreadful harvest. The Bible actually describes it as the harvest of Armageddon. Learn the story of what happened on November 29th, 2012, when the seeds were sown for the world's final battle, the growth of which are the events that will occur on the journey to where the story ends, at the reaping of the harvest of Armageddon. Call 1-800-END-TIME to order this important lesson.
Take your understanding of the end time to a new level with our Outlines and Quizzes workbook. This workbook accompanies our Understanding the End Time 14 lesson series. As you watch each lesson, follow along with the outlines, then take a quiz and check your answers at the end. These are all contained in one convenient workbook so you can study as well as teach prophecy wherever you go. Use it as a study guide to cement main points and scriptures that Irvin teaches in each lesson. It's also a great tool if you host an end-time Bible study. Help your group solidify what they're learning by getting a copy for each person to follow along with the video and then to take home and study on their own. Get the workbook by calling 1-800-ENDTIME or go to endtime.com and be ready to instruct many as the scripture says.
Before we go to Prime Minister Netanyahu's speech before the United Nations, which happened on October the 1st, so almost 1 week ago now, let me remind you that I will be in Metairie, Louisiana, which is a suburb of New Orleans, Louisiana. I will be there this coming Friday evening at 7:30. I'm going to be speaking on America's God-given destiny. A lot of people are wondering right now, what's going to happen to America? It's like we're turning a little bit away from Israel. Will we remain faithful to Israel? Where will we stand at the invasion of Israel by the Battle of Armageddon? How this is all going to come down? Well, the Bible has a lot to say about it. And this brand new lesson that we're now teaching, I find just absolutely amazing. So anyway, please be there if you're living in the New Orleans area or any place close. And then on Saturday evening, we'll have the same lesson in Madison, Mississippi, just a suburb of Jackson. Now that's going to be held at 601 Reunion Parkway in Madison, Mississippi, and also on Sunday morning at 9:30. We'll be speaking on breaking prophetic fulfillments and also having a question and answer session at that time. Oh, by the way, the location in Metairie, Louisiana on Friday evening will be the New Life Tabernacle, 6017 Airline Highway. So I hope you can be with us. It's going to be a great time. Now, let's get right to the speech that Netanyahu made before the UN General Assembly. Now, when Prime Minister Netanyahu goes into this auditorium, he knows he's facing a hostile crowd. When the vote was taken to raise the Palestinian flag over the United Nations, the vote was something like 151-8. So he's horribly outmanned. The 8 was the United States, Israel, Canada, and a few others. But mostly outmanned there. So he knows he's facing a hostile crowd. This is not a new situation. It happens all the time because the majority of the nations of the world today hate Israel and are very pro-Palestinian. They believe that Israel should withdraw from these territories and turn everything over to the Palestinians there. So with that in mind, let's go to the speech. Now, this is the full text of Prime Minister Netanyahu's address at the United General Assembly on the 1st of October. Ladies and gentlemen, I bring you greetings from Jerusalem, the city in which the Jewish people's hopes and prayers for peace for all humanity have echoed throughout the ages. So, after 3 days of listening to world leaders praise the nuclear deal with Iran, I begin my speech today by saying, ladies and gentlemen, check your enthusiasm at the door. You see, this deal doesn't make peace more likely. By fueling Iran's aggressions with billions of dollars in sanctions relief, it makes war more likely. Now, stop just a moment right there. Because you do realize that the big 5+1 all approved this agreement with Iran, and now the UN Security Council has voted on it. It's now been voted in the affirmative. And so Netanyahu is taking a very unpopular stance here, even in the face of the United States of America. Of course, there's been a lot of tension between Prime Minister Netanyahu and President Obama over the Iran deal. Netanyahu fought it all the way, but Obama pushed it through anyway. So keep that in mind as we go through this speech. Netanyahu continued, just look at what Iran has done in the last 6 months alone since the framework agreement was announced in Lausanne. Iran boosted its supply of devastating weapons to Syria. Iran sent more soldiers of its Revolutionary Guard to Syria. Iran sent thousands of Afghani and Pakistani Shiite fighters to Syria. Iran did all this to prop up Assad's brutal regime. Iran has also shipped tons of weapons and ammunition to the Houthi rebels in Yemen, including another shipment just 2 days ago. The Houthis, by the way, are an arm of Iran. Continuing, Iran threatened to topple Jordan. Iran's proxy, Hezbollah, smuggled into Lebanon SA-22 missiles to down our planes and Yakunt cruise missiles to sink our ships. Iran supplied Hezbollah with precision-guided surface-to-surface missiles and attack drones so it can accurately hit any target in Israel. Now let's pause right there. Prime Minister Netanyahu is giving facts here. I'm assuming that the Secret Service went over this speech and affirmed everything he said. So he's making quite a grocery list here of things that Iran has done and the very sobering implications of these actions. Let's continue. Iran aided Hamas and Islamic Jihad in building armed drones in Gaza. Iran also made clear its plans to open 2 new terror fronts against Israel, promising to arm Palestinians in the West Bank and sending its Revolutionary Guard generals to the Syrian side of the Golan Heights, from which its operatives recently fired rockets on northern Israel. Every few weeks, Iran and Hezbollah set up new terror cells in cities throughout the world. 3 such cells were recently uncovered in Kuwait, Jordan, and Cyprus. In May, security forces in Cyprus raided a Hezbollah agent's apartment in the city of Larnaca. There they found 5 tons of ammonium nitrate. That's roughly the same amount of ammonium nitrate that was used to blow up the federal building in Oklahoma City. And that's just one apartment in one city in one country. But Iran is setting up dozens of terror cells like this around the world. Ladies and gentlemen, they're setting up those terror cells in this hemisphere too. Now, remember, Netanyahu is in New York City, and he's saying they're setting these up right here in the United States of America. Continuing on, I repeat, Iran's been doing all of this, everything that I've just described, just in the last 6 months when it was trying to convince the world to remove the sanctions. Now, just imagine what Iran will do after those sanctions are lifted. Unleashed and unmuzzled, Iran will go on the prowl, devouring more and more prey. Now, remember, when the sanctions are lifted, that's going to give Iran approximately $150 billion that's been frozen. Suddenly that becomes available to Iran to do whatever it chooses to do with it. Okay, Prime Minister continued. In the wake of the nuclear deal, Iran is spending billions of dollars on weapons and satellites. You think Iran is doing that to advance peace? You think hundreds of billions of dollars in sanctions relief and fat contracts will turn this rapacious tiger into a kitten? If you do, you should think again. In 2013, President Rouhani began his so-called charm offensive here at the United Nations. 2 years later, Iran is executing more political prisoners, escalating its regional aggression, and rapidly expanding its global terror network. You know, they say actions speak louder than words. But in Iran's case, the words speak as loud as the actions. Just listen to the deputy commander of Iran's Revolutionary Guard, Quds Force. Here's what he said in February. The Islamic Revolution is not limited by geographic borders. He boasted that Afghanistan, Iraq, Lebanon, Syria, Palestine, and Yemen are among the countries being conquered by the Islamic Republic of Iran. Conquered, he said. And for those of you who believe that the deal in Vienna will bring a change in Iran's policy, just listen to what Iran's supreme leader, Ayatollah Khamenei, said 5 days after the nuclear deal was reached. Here's what he said. Our policies towards the arrogant government of the United States will not change. The United States, he vowed, will continue to be Iran's enemy. While giving the mullahs more money is likely to fuel more repression inside Iran, it will definitely fuel more aggression outside of Iran. As the leader of a country defending itself every day against Iran's growing aggression, I wish I could take comfort in the claim that this deal blocks Iran's path to nuclear weapons. But I can't, because it doesn't. I've said that if Iran wants to be treated like a normal country, let it act like a normal country. But this deal will treat Iran like a normal country, even if it remains a dark theocracy that conquers its neighbors, sponsors terrorism worldwide, and chants death to Israel, death to America. Does anyone seriously believe that flooding a radical theocracy with weapons and cash will curb its appetite for aggression? Do any of you really believe that a theocratic Iran with sharper claws and sharper fangs will be more likely to change its stripes? So here's a general rule that I've learned, and you must have learned in your lifetime. When bad behavior is rewarded, it only gets worse. Ladies and gentlemen, I have long said that the greatest danger facing our world is the coupling of militant Islam with nuclear weapons. And what makes matters even worse is that we see a world celebrating this bad deal, rushing to embrace and do business with a regime openly committed to our destruction. Last week, Major General Salahi, the commander of Iran's army, proclaimed this: "We will annihilate Israel for sure." We are glad that we are in the forefront of executing the Supreme Leader's order to destroy Israel. And as for the Supreme Leader himself, a few days after the nuclear deal was announced, he released his latest book. And here it is. We're going to pause right there for this break. You're listening to the speech of Prime Minister Netanyahu before the UN Security Council just about 7 days ago. We'll be right back.
Did you just tune in now and miss the first 30 minutes of End of the Age? No, it's really okay. Sorry, that was probably a little overdramatic. Anyway, just go to endtime.com and on the homepage, click the Archives button. There you can watch or listen to tons of previous broadcasts. You can also subscribe to End of the Age on iTunes and keep up to date with the prophecies in your podcast library. Oh, and just for future reference, the program does start at 3 p.m. Central Time, just so you're not late next time. Never miss another broadcast again by checking out the End of the Age archives page.
Jesus said that there would be a particular generation that would see specific things take place, and this would be the people that would see his second coming to the earth. The big question is, can we know this generation? Jesus talked about it in Matthew 24. From the fig tree learn its lesson. As soon as its branch becomes tender and put out its leaves, you know that summer is near. So also, when you see all these things, you know that he is near, at the very gates. Truly, I say to you, this generation will not pass away until all these things take place. Jesus said, when you see these things, what things was he talking about? In the DVD, This Generation Shall Not Pass, Irvin discusses the events that must occur that will let us know the generation that shall not pass until the second coming of Jesus Christ. Get this enlightening lesson by calling 1-800-END-TIME or go to endtime.com.
Let me pause just a minute to say to you that Judy and I and our entire tour group will be leaving for Israel on the 12th of November. It is going to be an incredible trip. Each one is. I don't know. It seems like every trip we take gets better. I suppose that's because the prophecies are a little further. It's to us as we go through the prophecies. Conference or an end time tour to Israel is that it's a prophecy tour. Many tours you take, you can get the history, but you probably don't get the prophecy. Getting half of a tour. But when you go on an end time prophecy tour, we're going to stand on the place where prophecies are being fulfilled right now. We're going to stand on the places that prophecy will soon be fulfilled during this tour. Stand on the site where the Battle of Armageddon will begin, and you will stand on the site where the Battle of Armageddon will end. It promises to be an amazing tour. So we have, I think, 4 days or so left for you to register. So please do not wait. Pick up the phone right now. Give us a call. My granddaughter tells me today that we have just a few spots left. So call 1-800-END-TIME. Ask to speak to someone about the tour. They'll tell you all about it. There's still time, but you do need to move right away. I think it's 4 or 5 days that we have left right now. But if you could go with Judy and I, well, we'll be with you for the next 12 days for breakfast, dinner, supper. We'll be on the buses with you. We'll be giving prophecy briefings all along the way. It is a wonderful experience, and I know it'll be the trip of a lifetime. So if you're interested, don't wait. Maybe you're one of those people who like to make last-minute decisions. Well, now's the time for your last-minute decision. The number to call, 1-800-END-TIME. Now, I want to get back to Prime Minister Netanyahu's speech because we're now to the point where he's referring to a book that's just been released by the supreme leader of Iran. Now, get this in your mind. Iran has a supreme leader, someone, his word is final. After all the trappings of democracy and everything, and all their elections and all that they have, if anyone disagrees with the supreme leader, the elections go out the window. They mean nothing because he is the supreme leader. He is the religious leader over all of Iran. So we're going now into his book, Netanyahu speaking. It's a 400-page screed detailing his plan to destroy the state of Israel. Last month, Khomeini once again made his genocidal intentions clear before Iran's top clerical body, the Assembly of Experts. He spoke about Israel, home to over 6 million Jews. He pledged there will be no Israel in 25 years. 70 years after the murder of 6 million Jews, Iran's rulers promise to destroy my country, murder my people. And the response from this body, he's speaking to the UN now, the response from this body, the response from nearly every one of the governments represented here has been absolutely nothing. Utter silence. Deafening silence. And then Netanyahu stopped for 45 seconds and didn't say a word. He just glared at every ambassador to the UN there representing all the countries. And you can almost feel people starting to squirm in their seats as he reminded them that this supreme leader of Iran that they had all just agreed to this deal with had just published a book declaring in 25 years Israel is going to be destroyed. Netanyahu says, that's my people. That's 6 million people. Hitler killed 6 million 70 years ago. Now Khomeini wants to do it all over again. It was a sobering moment. I was listening to the speech at the time, and the impact was quite amazing. Well, Prime Minister Netanyahu continued, perhaps you can now understand why Israel is not joining you in celebrating this deal. If Iran's rulers were working to destroy your countries, perhaps you'd be less enthusiastic about the deal. If Iran's terror proxies were firing thousands of rockets at your cities, perhaps you'd be more measured in your praise. Besides Iran's aggression in the Middle East and its terror around the world, Iran is also building intercontinental ballistic missiles whose sole purpose is to carry nuclear warheads. Now remember this, Iran already has missiles that can reach Israel. That's a settled issue. So these intercontinental ballistic missiles that Iran is building, they're not meant for us, Netanyahu said. They're meant for you, for Europe, for America, for raining down mass destruction anytime, anywhere. Now let's make sure everybody understands here. Netanyahu is saying the only purpose of these intercontinental ballistic missiles that Iran is developing right now, and by the way, the deal that was struck between the 5 powers plus one and the whole situation led by Barack Obama, that deal carefully avoided mentioning the intercontinental ballistic missiles at all. The international community wanted this deal so bad that they didn't dare bring that up because they knew it would torpedo the whole deal. So now then, Netanyahu is saying those are designed for you. And this agreement, which does not take away any centrifuges to produce nuclear material, it leaves all of them. All it does is provide for inspections for 10 years, after which all the controls go off. Now, he's saying in 10 years, if they don't decide to cheat before, they can produce a lot of nuclear material and they can put them on those intercontinental ballistic missiles and they can fulfill their Islamic dream of ruling the world, because any person who is a true Muslim who follows the Quran and the Hadith believes that Islam should rule the world. So, Mr. Ayatollah Khomeini believes that Islam should rule the world. So they have to prepare to rule the world. And this agreement gives them a 10-year reprieve so that they don't have economic sanctions. Now they can maximize the effect of their oil riches and everything can boom in Iran. They'll have a lot of money to work with. They can build up their power base, which they're already doing, and get ready for Islam to rule the world. Netanyahu continues. Ladies and gentlemen, it's not easy to oppose something that is embraced by the greatest powers in the world. And who embraced it? Russia, United States, China, France, Great Britain, Germany. Those were the 6 powers that negotiated the deal. And Netanyahu says, it's not easy for me, as a leader of a small nation of merely 6 million people, it's not easy for me to stand and oppose the greatest powers on earth. Then he continues, believe me, it would be far easier to remain silent. But throughout our history, the Jewish people have learned the heavy price of silence. And as the prime minister of the Jewish state, as someone who knows the history, I refuse to be silent. But in Israel, we never forget one thing. We never forget that the most important partner that Israel has always been and will always be the United States of America. Notice he takes a switch in his speech here. And he stops, in spite of all of the acrimony and the tension that has existed between himself and President Barack Obama, he wants to mend some fences here. He says, the best friend that we've had and will ever have is the United States of America. He goes on to say, the alliance between Israel and the United States is unshakable. President Obama and I agree on the need to keep arms out of the hands of Iran's terror proxies. We agree on the need to stop Iran from destabilizing countries throughout the Middle East. Israel deeply appreciates President Obama's willingness to bolster our security, help Israel maintain its qualitative military edge, and help Israel confront the enormous challenges we face. Now he's pausing here to give thanks because right in the middle of all this tension, the United States has continued to supply the arms that Israel needs, in particular to produce what they call the Iron Dome. A new name for it is David's Sling. The United States and Israel are working together to produce hundreds and hundreds of these things that successfully picked off rockets that were fired from Gaza during the conflict of 2014. So he's stopping to, again, mend some fences, to try to minister to the relationship between Israel and the United States of America. Prime Minister Netanyahu continues here. Israel is grateful that this sentiment is widely shared by the American people and its representatives in Congress, by both those who supported the deal and by those who opposed it. President Obama and I have both said that our differences over the nuclear deal are a disagreement within the family. As the Middle East descends into chaos, Israel's peace agreements with Egypt and Jordan are 2 cornerstones of stability. Israel remains committed to achieving peace with the Palestinians as well. Now, we're going to pause right there. And I want to complete this speech. If we have time, we'll take some of your phone calls as soon as we're finished with that. You're listening to Politics and Religion. Stay right here with us.
Hello, this is Judy Baxter. My husband and I would like to invite you on Endtime's Fall Prophecy Tour to Israel. I've been there 24 times and I'm still excited about going. I love sailing on the Sea of Galilee where Jesus walked on the water and going to the Garden Tomb where Jesus rose from the dead. And as you probably know, my husband's favorite place is standing on the Mount of Olives overlooking Jerusalem where Jesus will soon return. Not only will we walk in the footsteps of Jesus when he was here on earth, but we will also be walking into the future, learning from the Bible what will soon take place. I can't recommend a greater prophecy lesson than going to Israel. We look forward to getting to know you as we have made many friends on these tours. Space is limited, so register today by calling 1-800-ENDTIME and ask to speak to my daughter Jana or my granddaughter Holly about the tour. In Israel, there is a special feeling that is hard to explain. It's probably knowing that Jesus Christ himself walked in that land. I hope you will come and experience a trip you will never forget. The Lord bless each and every one of you.
In case you're just joining us, yesterday we went through the speech of Mahmoud Abbas, the head of the Palestinians, before the UN Security Council. Today we're going through the speech of Prime Minister Netanyahu, again before the United Nations. So let's continue on. Netanyahu says, Israelis know the price of war. I know the price of war. I was nearly killed in battle. I lost many friends. I lost my beloved brother, Yanni. Those who know the price of war can best appreciate what the blessings of peace would mean for ourselves, our children, our grandchildren. I am prepared to immediately resume direct peace negotiations with the Palestinian Authority without any preconditions whatsoever. Unfortunately, President Abbas said yesterday that he is not prepared to do this. Well, I hope he changes his mind, because I remain committed to a vision of two states for two peoples, in which a demilitarized Palestinian state recognizes the Jewish state. Now, let's pause there just a moment, because you may remember that back about a year ago, when the elections were taking place in Israel, Netanyahu looked like he was on the brink of losing the election. He came out and said, a Palestinian state will not be established on my watch. A lot of the people on the right of Israel swung to him and voted for him on the strength of that statement. No sooner were the votes counted than he changed his tune and said, I did not mean that the way it sounded. I still stand for the two-state solution. Now, who's right and who's wrong? Should Israel favor a two-state solution or not? Should Israel give away to the Palestinians what Almighty God said would belong to Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob? Should Israel be so cowardly and so afraid that they cave in to the pressure from the international community to do this? Now, that's what Netanyahu is doing. I'm not in any way bashing Mr. Netanyahu. He is under incredible pressure. The nations of the world all around him are pressuring him. However, he should not be embracing the two-state solution, because he's giving away the land that God promised to his father Abraham to the Palestinians. And by the way, the name Palestine is another way of pronouncing the name Philistine. Can you imagine giving the promised land away to the Philistines just because of international pressure? That's what's going on here. Netanyahu continued, you know the peace process began over 2 decades ago. Yet, despite the best efforts of 6 Israeli prime ministers, Rabin, Peres, Barak, Sharon, Olmert, and myself, the Palestinians have consistently refused to end the conflict and make a final peace with Israel. And unfortunately, you heard that rejectionism again only yesterday from President Abbas. How can Israel make peace with a Palestinian partner who refuses to even sit at the negotiating table Israel expects the Palestinian Authority to abide by its commitments. President Abbas, I know it's not easy. I know it's hard. But we owe it to our peoples to try, to continue to try, because together, if we actually negotiate and stop negotiating about negotiations, if we actually sit down and try to resolve this conflict between us, recognize each other, not using a Palestinian state as a stepping stone for another Islamist dictatorship in the Middle East, but something that will live at peace next to the Jewish state. If we actually do that, we can do remarkable things for our people. The UN won't help peace, certainly won't help advance peace by trying to impose solutions or by encouraging Palestinian rejectionism. And the UN distinguished delegates should do one more thing. The UN should finally rid itself of the obsessive bashing of Israel. Here's just one absurd example of this obsession. In 4 years of horrific violence in Syria, more than 250,000 people have lost their lives. That's more than 10 times the number of Israelis and Palestinians combined who have lost their lives in a century of conflict between us. Yet last year, this assembly, speaking of the United Nations, adopted 20 resolutions against Israel and just one resolution about the savage slaughter in Syria. Talk about injustice. Talk about disproportionality. 20, count them. And only one against Syria? 20 in 1 year, and only one against Syria. When will you start working with Israel to advance peace and reconciliation and stop libeling Israel, stop inciting hatred and violence? President Abbas, here's a good place to begin. Stop spreading lies about Israel's alleged intentions on the Temple Mount. Israel is fully committed to maintaining the status quo there. Let's pause there just a moment. Because what's happened is Abbas is blaming Israel for the recent conflict on the Temple Mount. However, all of it has been caused by masked Palestinians hiding in the Al-Aqsa Mosque and running out and throwing firebombs and rocks at the police. In the meantime, Netanyahu has strongly kept the Jews from praying or doing any religious activity. All they can do is go visit. So he has held strong while the only violations to the status quo have been committed by the Palestinians, and yet Abbas blames all those things on Israel. Continuing on, what President Abbas should be speaking out against are the actions of militant Islamists who are smuggling explosive into the Al-Aqsa Mosque and who are trying to prevent Jews and Christians from visiting the holy sites. Far from endangering the holy sites, it is Israel that ensures their safety. Now, it's true, Israel has very carefully safeguarded the Al-Aqsa Mosque and the Dome of the Rock. Now, I want to just note here that's in direct commandment against God, against the commandment of God. God said, when I bring you into the land I promised you, you are to tear down the pagan houses of worship, the statues, everything. So here Netanyahu is bragging about being so broad-minded that he protects these holy places that are devoted to a false god, Allah, and he's boasting about it when actually God ordered him to destroy those places. Okay, let's continue on now because it's so important. So Netanyahu should not be bragging. He should be destroying them like God ordered him to destroy them. Netanyahu continues, 10 miles from ISIS, a few hundred yards from Iran's murderous proxies, Israel stands in the breach, proudly and courageously defending freedom and progress. Israel is civilization's front line in the battle against barbarism. ISIS has moved into Syria on the northern border of Israel, and Israel is standing against ISIS continuing. So here's a novel idea for the United Nations. Instead of continuing the shameful routine of bashing Israel, stand with Israel. Stand with Israel as we check the fanaticism at our door. Stand with Israel as we prevent that fanaticism from reaching your door. Ladies and gentlemen, stand with Israel, because Israel is not just defending itself. More than ever, Israel is defending you. Powerful speech by Prime Minister Netanyahu, and I realize I've taken all the time today. However, I know that many of you probably have not had the time to go through that speech carefully. So here we see the big conflict. The Palestinians are saying that Israel has to totally withdraw from the West Bank. Netanyahu is saying, look, we are willing to withdraw and to create a Palestinian state if you will give us defensible borders and if you will recognize our right to exist as an Israeli, as a Jewish state. We're willing to recognize you as a Palestinian state, but yet the Palestinians have said, oh no, we can't recognize you as a Jewish state. Their contention is there's 1.6 million Arabs living in Israel today. And of course they live there and they vote in the elections. They're given the right to vote, and they actually have, I think, 12 members now in the Israeli Knesset. But nevertheless, these situations just won't come together. But let me conclude by saying this. There is going to be a peace deal. And all of the maneuvering at the United Nations this last week between Abbas and Netanyahu and others is all jockeying for position. Eventually, all this jockeying is going to end up in an agreement. And when this agreement takes place, it will mark the beginning of the final 7 years to Armageddon. Could it happen within the next year? It could. It could easily happen within the next year or 2 years or 3. I don't see how it can go on much longer than that. What I'm saying to all of you out there is that once this agreement is struck, the final 7 years to Armageddon will begin. We are in the end time right now, ladies and gentlemen. If you're not right with God, get right with God. Don't wait any longer, because we are in the end time right now. If you are right with God, or whether you are not, I'd like to invite you to join Endtime Ministries. Become a partner with us. We want to reach every person on earth with this message in the very short time we have left. We need your help. Become a partner with Endtime today. All you do is pick up the phone, call 1-800-ENDTIME, tell us what you would like to do. Welcome aboard. God bless you all.
Politics and Religion is a production of Endtime Ministries. It is a daily 1-hour broadcast dedicated to bringing you the prophetic fulfillments happening on a daily basis.
If you would like to listen to archive shows, subscribe to Endtime Magazine, find a prophecy conference in your area, order Endtime resources, watch our TV show, or subscribe to our free weekly e-news, call 1-800-ENDTIME or go to endtime.com and take advantage of what our site has to offer.
Connect to Endtime Ministries by partnering with us and help this message make a global impact.
Endtime Ministries is partner supported. We would like to say thank you to all of our loyal partners, listeners, and friends for helping make Politics and Religion and Endtime Ministries possible.